What if I told you that the biggest barrier to your learning isn't your intelligence, but the way you've been taught to learn your entire life? We live in an era of unlimited access to information, yet, paradoxically, many of us feel like we're always one step behind, struggling to keep up. The issue isn't a lack of effort. It's applying that effort within a system that, fundamentally, wasn't designed for the speed and complexity of today's world. In the next few minutes, I'm not going to give you a list of hacks or fleeting tricks. We're going deeper. We're going to explore the architecture of your mind and how you can redesign it. I ask you, what if accelerated learning isn't a genetic gift, but a skill that can be built? How can we unlearn the habits that slow us down? And, more importantly, what is the first step to building a new mental framework that allows us to absorb, retain, and apply knowledge in a way that seems almost unattainable today? The answers to these questions could change not just your career, but the very way you interact with the world. The architecture of our inefficiency. Let's start by acknowledging an uncomfortable truth. The educational system that shaped most of us prepared us for a world that no longer exists. It taught us to be excellent receptacles of information. We learned to sit still, listen, memorize for a test, and then promptly discard much of what we memorized to make room for the next batch of data. This process, repeated for over a decade, carves deep neurological grooves. It trains us for passive learning, where knowledge is something given to us, not something we actively build. That foundation of passive learning is fundamentally fragile in the 21st century. The skill that matters now isn't the ability to retain isolated facts. We have machines for that. The real skill is to quickly assimilate complex new competencies, connect ideas from different fields, and apply that knowledge to solve novel problems. Continuing to use the memorization method for this task is like trying to climb a mountain with a map of a flat city. The tool simply doesn't match the challenge. The frustration you feel, that sense of running in place, isn't a reflection of your innate ability. It's the inevitable result of using outdated mental software to run the complex programs of modern life. The first and most crucial mindset shift is this. Stop seeing yourself as a student and start seeing yourself as an architect. You're not here to fill an empty space in your head. You're here to build a structure of understanding, brick by brick. The teacher principle. Teaching to learn. One of the fastest ways to force this shift from passive to active is to adopt what's known as the Feynman technique, named after the physicist Richard Feynman. The essence is simple. Take a concept you want to master and explain it in plain, simple language, as if you were teaching it to a child. This isn't about dumbing down the content, but about simplifying your own understanding of it. This act forces your mind to go beyond merely recognizing a word or a formula. When you try to verbalize or write down an explanation for someone else, you immediately expose the gaps in your own comprehension. You discover the areas where your knowledge is shallow, where you're just parroting something you heard without truly internalizing it. This process of identifying gaps is where real learning begins. It transforms studying from a solitary, consumptive activity to a creative one. It's the difference between reading a cookbook and actually cooking the meal. So, the first practical step to accelerate your learning is this. Whenever you're learning something new, ask yourself, how would I explain this to someone who knows nothing about it? Grab a notebook and try to do just that. Use analogies, use metaphors. The effort of translating the complex into the simple is what cements the knowledge in your brain in a way that passive reading never can. It's an active process of mental digestion, deconstructing the mountain into stones. The second major obstacle to rapid learning is the feeling of being overwhelmed. When we look at a new skill, whether it's learning to code or becoming more confident in social situation, it looks like an insurmountable mountain. Our brain, seeking efficiency, often leads us to procrastination as a defense mechanism against this monumental task. The solution isn't more willpower, but more strategy. The key is deconstruction. Any skill, no matter how complex, is simply a collection of smaller, interconnected sub-skills. For example, if you want to improve your social skills, you don't focus on the vague goal of being charismatic. You break it down. You focus on learning how to ask a good open-ended question, then learning to listen actively without interrupting, and then learning how to politely and naturally end a conversation. Each of these is a small project with a clear beginning and end. This approach has a profound psychological effect. It removes the fear and analysis paralysis. Every small stone you master gives you a hit of dopamine, a feeling of progress and competence that fuels you for the next one. Learning stops being an intimidating struggle and becomes a rewarding game of collecting small wins. Before you know it, you're no longer looking up at a mountain, you're standing on top of it, having gotten there one step at a time. The power of intentional focus. In our world of constant notifications and endless distractions, the ability to focus deeply on a single task has become a genuine superpower. We can't talk about accelerated learning without talking about the practice of focused, deliberate work. Learning something complex quickly requires uninterrupted blocks of time where your attention is fully dedicated to the task at hand. It's not about studying longer, but studying with more intensity. Deliberate practice is more than just focus. It's focus with a purpose. It means working at the very edge of your current ability, constantly pushing yourself slightly beyond what's comfortable. It's identifying the weakest part of your game and relentlessly attacking it. If you're learning to be a better communicator, it's not just repeating stories you already tell well. It's actively practicing your vocal modulation or learning to hold eye contact in situations that make you uncomfortable. This type of effort is mentally taxing, and for that reason, it can't be sustained for 8 hours straight. Instead, think in short, intense sprints. 60 to 90 minutes of total focus, followed by a real break where you let your mind completely disconnect. It's during these rest periods that your brain consolidates what you've learned. The quality of your focus far outweighs the quantity of time spent in a state of semi-attention, connecting knowledge to life. Finally, the fastest, most lasting learning is the kind that connects to something that already exists within us. Our brain doesn't store information like a computer, in isolated folders. It stores it in a vast, interconnected network of neurons. The more connections a new piece of information has to the knowledge, memories, and emotions you already possess, the stronger your retention will be. That's why the final question you should always ask yourself is, how does this relate to what I already know? Where does this fit into my life? If you're learning about emotional intelligence, connect the concepts to a conflict you had at work, to a character in a movie, or to a challenge in your relationship. Create a web of meaning around the new knowledge. This practice transforms abstract information into personal wisdom. It ceases to be an external fact and becomes part of your thinking framework, ready to be used and applied in creative ways. Ultimately, learning faster than others isn't a competition with them. It's an optimization of your own internal process. It's about replacing frustration with strategy, fear with curiosity, and passivity with active creation. It's understanding that the human mind has a nearly limitless capacity for learning, as long as we give it the right tools and the right environment to flourish. It's about becoming a conscious and intentional participant in your own growth. Part 2. The space between. Now that we've established the methods, the strategies, and the techniques, the how, I'd like us to pause. Knowledge of these tools is powerful, but on its own, it's incomplete. The truth, as many of us have discovered the hard way, is that knowing what to do is rarely the real obstacle. The real challenge lies in the silent space between knowledge and action. This is where our deepest beliefs, our fears, and the stories we tell ourselves live. And it's to this place that we must look if we truly want to transform the way we learn and live. I want you to think honestly about your relationship with failure, not catastrophic failure, but the everyday micro failures. Think about the last time you tried something new and didn't get it right on the first try. What was your immediate internal reaction? Not the reaction you showed the world, but the fleeting thought that crossed your mind. Was it a thought of curiosity? Like, interesting, why didn't that work? Or was it one of judgment, like, I'm not good at this, or this is too hard for me? That little voice, that internal narrator, is the screenwriter of your reality. This voice becomes especially loud when the skill we want to learn is interpersonal. Learning a programming language is a challenge between you and the machine. Failure is private. But trying to improve your social skills, become a better leader, a more present partner that requires real-time practice with other people. The risk of failure here isn't a compiler error. It's an awkward silence, a look of disinterest, a perceived rejection. This fear of social exposure and judgment is one of the most potent inhibitors of personal growth, and overcoming it requires a quiet courage. For many of us, especially for men who were socialized to value competence and certainty, the act of being a beginner is deeply uncomfortable. Feeling clumsy, slow, and confused runs counter to the image we often feel we need to project. And so I ask, to what extent does your fear of looking incompetent, even if only to yourself, stop you from fully embracing the learning process? Are you avoiding certain areas of growth, not because you lack the ability, but because the initial phase of not knowing is too psychologically costly? Reflect on that. Embrace that vulnerability, because within it lies the potential for exponential growth. Now, let's go to a second layer of reflection. Think of a specific skill you want to acquire. It could be something professional, like data analysis, or something deeply personal, like becoming more confident in social settings. Hold that skill in your mind. Now, ask yourself, why do I want to learn this? The first answer that comes up will likely be superficial. Don't stop there. Take that answer and ask, why? Again. If you want the promotion, why do you want it? For the financial security? For the respect? Continue this process. Keep asking, why? Until you can no longer answer with an external reason. You'll arrive at a feeling, a core value. When you connect your effort to a meaningful, intrinsic why, you unlock a source of motivation that discipline alone can never offer. What is your real why? This leads us to a question of identity. Who are you? We cling to labels like engineer, manager, or introvert because they give us stability. But they can also become cages. If your identity is firmly anchored in being someone who knows, how can you make space to become someone who is learning? The process of rapid learning requires a fluid identity. Think about your environment. Does it celebrate the messy process of learning or only the polished final result? Often, our progress isn't limited by our own minds, but by the ecosystem of ideas we place ourselves in. Have you cultivated an environment that nurtures curiosity or one that demands certainty? Finally, I want you to question yourself about joy. Somewhere along the way, we've come to associate learning with work and obligation. We've forgotten the primal joy of discovery we had as children. How can you reintroduce the element of play into your learning? Reframing learning not as a chore, but as a form of exploration and play can completely change your relationship with effort. What would be the most fun and engaging way to practice the skill you want to learn today? Finding the answer to that may be the most powerful secret of all. Throughout our conversation, we've dismantled the idea that the ability to learn quickly is a rare gift. The central premise, from the very beginning, has been that accelerated learning is less about innate talent and more about an intentional process. It's a skill that can be cultivated. We've seen that the key to unlocking this skill isn't in accumulating more information, but in fundamentally changing our approach to it. To recap our practical points, we explored the need to shift from being a passive learner to an active creator of knowledge. This is beautifully embodied in the philosophy of physicist Richard Feynman, who taught us that the true measure of knowledge is the ability to explain it simply. We also covered the strategy of deconstructing complex skills into smaller, manageable parts, a method for overcoming paralysis and building momentum. This idea is the foundation of works like Josh Kaufman's in his book, The First 20 Hours. We talked about the discipline of focus. The concept of deliberate practice was extensively researched by psychologist Anders Ericsson, whose studies on expert performance were popularized in his book, Peak: Secrets from the New Science of Expertise. His research confirms that it's the quality and intensity of focus that separate the good from the great. In our distracted world, the ability to cultivate this deep focus, as Cal Newport describes in Deep Work, is the very currency of skill mastery. But the techniques are only half of the equation. Our deeper investigation led us to our internal narratives. Stanford University researcher Carol S. Dweck has dedicated her career to this, and her seminal work, Mindset: The New Psychology of Success, provides compelling evidence that the most significant factor in learning is the belief that your abilities can be developed. The shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset is the foundation upon which all other techniques are built. The path to learning anything faster, therefore, is not a race against others. It's the practice of becoming a more conscious, curious, and resilient architect of your own mind. It's about having the courage to be a beginner, the strategy to simplify the complex, the discipline to focus without distraction, and most importantly, the wisdom to connect what you learn to why you live. That is the true essence of accelerated learning. If this conversation resonated with you, if it sparked some curiosity or gave you a new perspective on your own potential, I invite you to continue this journey with us. The best way to do that is by subscribing to the channel. Our goal here is to have exactly these kinds of dialogues exploring the architecture of the mind to build a more intentional life. And if you believe this message could be useful to someone else, perhaps a friend or colleague who is struggling to learn something new, consider sharing the video. You might be the one who offers them the perspective they needed. Finally, I genuinely want to hear your story. The comment section below isn't just a formality, it's our community space. Leave a comment sharing a single skill you now feel inspired to learn. More importantly, what is the real why behind it? Reading your responses and seeing your aspirations is genuinely the most rewarding part of creating this content.